A sudden, mocking laugh shattered the calm of a sunny afternoon. Officer Reynolds sneered at a war hero frozen in panic, his dignity unraveling before a stunned crowd. The tension snapped, and something inside Jake Martin broke that day. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The laughter echoed sharply, shattering the fragile calm like glass underfoot. Jake's muscles tensed, his jaw clenched so tight it seemed his teeth might crack. Memories surged unbidden, gunfire in distant deserts, comrades lost in the chaos, moments where every noise was a warning, every heartbeat a battle. The crowd around them, a cluster of familiar neighbors who once greeted him with genuine warmth, now felt like a jury silently judging. Some looked away, uncomfortable, others fuming behind polite masks. Jake's PTSD was an invisible wound, one that had never stopped bleeding. His service had earned medals and respect, but it also left him walking through life with a fragile thread tethering him to reality. That laugh? It threatened to snap that thread completely. Tom's mockery wasn't just an insult, it was a denial of Jake's pain, an erasure of the sacrifices no one else seemed willing to talk about. In that moment, Jake felt the weight of loneliness that so often accompanied his condition, the crushing isolation, even amid a crowd. Tom, meanwhile, stood rigid with a smug confidence, born from ignorance and insecurity. Growing up in a family that prized toughness and dismissed vulnerability, he'd learned to mask his fears with sarcasm and sneers. Veterans like Jake represented something he neither understood nor respected. People who had faced unimaginable horrors, yet were now demanding special treatment, or so Tom believed. In his mind, the uniform was a relic, a faded badge that didn't entitle anyone to exceptions in the real world. His laughter was a shield, a way to deny the discomfort Jake's episode stirred inside him, discomfort that threatened his own fragile sense of control. No one spoke at first. The hum of the community event dimmed, replaced by a charged silence. Jake's hands trembled slightly at his sides as he fought to keep his composure. His breath was shallow, uneven, and though his face was pale, his eyes burned with a quiet fury. Not just at Tom, but at the system that seemed to pit them against each other. Years of training tried to pull him back from the edge, but the sting of humiliation was a new battlefield, and he was losing ground. Then, a woman in the crowd whispered Jake's name softly, her voice a thread of comfort in the growing tension. Others shifted uneasily, some averting their gaze in shame, but Tom's expression hardened. The smirk twisted into something colder, his laughter subsiding into a sneer that dared anyone to challenge him. His eyes flicked toward the nearest bystander, daring them to defend the veteran he was openly mocking. To Tom, this was a test of dominance, a moment to assert his authority in a community that revered military sacrifice more than he cared to admit. The event's organizers, sensing the shift, edged closer, murmuring urgent appeals for calm, but the damage was done. The invisible crack had formed, and no amount of polite intervention could immediately mend what Tom's laughter had broken. Jake's mind raced, caught between the instinct to flee and the drive to stand firm. Every fiber of his being screamed against the humiliation, the disbelief that someone sworn to protect could be the source of such profound disrespect. As Jake swallowed the rising tide of emotion, a slow burn of something else kindled beneath the surface, something resolute and unyielding. This wasn't just about a laugh anymore. It was a confrontation with a deeper injustice, a moment where silence might feel safer, but would only guarantee more wounds hidden beneath the surface. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of his storm, Jake knew this was only the beginning. The air was thick with tension as Maria's voice cut through the charged silence, sharp and unwavering. "Show some respect," she demanded, stepping between Jake and Tom with a fire that seemed to ignite the entire crowd. Her words, firm and commanding, carried the weight of someone who had seen enough injustice to refuse silence. But Tom's response was a cold, dismissive shrug, the sneer on his face deepening into open contempt. His eyes locked with Maria's for a moment, a silent challenge radiating from his stance. This was not a debate, but a declaration of dominance. Jake, caught between the escalating confrontation and the tightening grip of his own spiraling mind, faltered. His legs trembled beneath him, the edges of his vision darkening as the familiar, suffocating grip of PTSD took hold. Heart hammering erratically, breaths shallow and ragged, he stumbled away from the crowd, each step a battle against the flood of panic rising within. The public space that moments before had felt safe now seemed hostile, a pressure cooker threatening to explode. His voice was lost beneath the murmur of bystanders and the crackling of camera phones that had already begun to capture his unraveling. The clip went viral by evening, an unflinching glimpse into a man fighting invisible demons while being mocked by someone entrusted with his community's safety. Social media exploded, hashtags ignited, posts multiplied, voices rose. Veterans shared their own scars, their own moments of ridicule and neglect. Advocates demanded accountability, and ordinary citizens expressed disbelief that such a scene could unfold so openly, so callously. The outrage was raw and immediate, a collective reckoning with the systemic failures laid bare by one moment of cruelty. Local police spokespeople scrambled to contain the fallout, issuing statements that framed the incident as a misunderstanding, a lapse in judgment quickly corrected, but their words rang hollow against the tide of public fury. The story did not fade, it metastasized, drawing in national attention. Homeland Security quietly moved behind the scenes, recognizing the gravity of the situation. Jake's history in military intelligence made the incident more than just a local scandal. It was now a matter with potential security implications. The inquiry they launched was thorough and discreet, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding online. Within the police department, uncomfortable truths emerged. Tom's commanding officer disclosed a private, painful backstory, a loss that had hardened Tom's heart and poisoned his perspective on trauma and veterans. This revelation, meant to provide context, instead fanned the flames of public anger. It became a symbol not of understanding, but of institutional failure. A man broken by grief, allowed to channel his bitterness into mistreatment of those he was sworn to serve alongside. The narrative shifted, exposing a rot deeper than one man's cruelty, a systemic failure to support and respect those who had sacrificed everything. For Jake, the humiliation was a jagged wound, raw and pulsing beneath his skin. The incident replayed endlessly in his mind, each moment a fresh sting. Yet amidst the isolation, something remarkable began to take root. The flood of support that poured in from all corners, letters, calls, social media messages, carried a fragile but growing ember of hope. People were not just watching, they were standing with him. Their solidarity became a shield against the dark tide threatening to consume him, a reminder that his pain was not invisible and his dignity was worth defending. In that swell of collective outrage and compassion, Jake found the first threads of a rising storm, one that promised to challenge the injustice and perhaps redefine the battle lines themselves. The room was charged with an electric silence as Homeland Security convened the hearing that would expose more than just one officer's cruelty. It would lay bare the fractures in a system struggling to uphold its own standards. Bright lights illuminated the polished wood paneling, cameras strategically positioned to capture every glance, every word. National anchors narrated with practiced gravity as millions tuned in, waiting for accountability to arrive on this unyielding stage. Tom Reynolds entered with a swagger, a mask of cocky bravado that seemed designed to dismiss the weight of the accusations against him. His badge gleamed on his uniform, a symbol now poised precariously on the edge of disgrace. The opening statements were taut, formal, yet beneath the polished veneer, tension simmered like a storm ready to break. Homeland Security Agent Karen Blake, poised and unflinching, took the floor. Her voice was steady, but carried the quiet authority of someone who had unraveled layers of deception and prejudice. She presented a dossier that was impossible to ignore. A trail of complaints filed against Tom Reynolds, meticulously documented instances of verbal abuse and disrespect directed specifically at veterans. The paper trail spoke volumes: testimonies from fellow officers, written warnings, internal investigations that had been brushed aside or buried. This was no isolated lapse. It was a pattern of contempt. Tom's smirk faltered. His initial denials and defensive quips lost their edge as Blake detailed each incident with clinical precision. The room's atmosphere shifted palpably, the earlier cockiness drained away by undeniable evidence. Reporters scribbled furiously, commentators leaned forward, viewers across the country held their breath. When Blake solemnly announced the immediate suspension of Reynolds's badge, a collective gasp echoed through the auditorium. The emblem of authority was ripped away in real time, a potent symbol of justice beginning to take hold. Tom's defiant posture crumbled. His face, once cocky and unrepentant, now betrayed disbelief and mounting dread. Jake, seated across the room, bore witness not only to a vindication of his personal ordeal, but to a moment that transcended individual grievance. His posture was quiet, but resolute, his eyes reflecting a complex blend of relief, pain, and quiet triumph. This was more than a reprieve. It was a statement to every veteran silenced by mockery and neglect, a clear message that their invisible wounds demanded recognition and respect. The weight of his years of service, of battles fought in distant lands and in the shadows of his mind, was acknowledged on the national stage. When the floor opened for Jake's statement, the room seemed to hold its breath again. His voice, steady and unwavering, cut through the charged atmosphere. "We carry scars you can't see," he declared, "but that doesn't make us less worthy of respect or justice. Today, we take a stand for dignity, for healing, and for every brother and sister who fights a battle no one else understands." Each word resonated with the truth of lived experience, the courage born from suffering and resilience. The room erupted in applause, a thunderous wave that rippled beyond the walls of the hearing room, swelling across living rooms and public squares. The moment crystallized into something larger, a turning point in a national conversation about mental health, respect, and the obligations owed to those who serve. Jake's courage transformed personal pain into a collective call for change, inspiring others to speak, to demand accountability, and to reject the silence that too often cloaked invisible wounds. The badge pulled from Tom Reynolds was more than disciplinary action. It was justice served, a rebuke to cruelty, and the ignition of a movement that would not be forgotten.